Good morning and welcome to another episode of Church for Men. I'm excited to see you this morning and I'm fired up about what we have for this morning. It's going to be a great time. Have you ever felt down in the dumps before? Have you ever felt despaired or depressed? Have you felt like a zero? That's what we're going to be talking about today, is going from zero to hero and what it takes to get there, what it takes to have a turnaround story. And I think this is it's an incredible lesson that's appropriately timed, especially with everything that's going on in our world right now. It's a tough time for many people. I've talked to a lot of guys who are having a very difficult time. I know a lot of husbands are having a tough time right now. Single men, you guys are having a tough time. Campus teens, the whole gamut. Everyone is having a difficult time being isolated or dealing with everything that our world is throwing at us right now. It seems like 2020 is one thing after the other. But we're going to dig in today and we're going to look at how it can go from zero to hero for each and every one of us. Like I've said before, normally we'd be paintballing and having a ton of fun and being guys and doing a lot of fun things together. But I want to start off today by showing a short clip of a guy who went from zero to hero. Wow, that's an incredible story. I always get inspired watching that, especially. I mean, he was burnt in a fire, and then he told he was never going to walk again, and then he came back and won the 1 mile and later the 800. I mean, what a phenomenal story of someone who is told they would be nothing and then became something one day. I think a lot of us have stories like that in sports. Where we were told we wouldn't amount to anything. And that drove us, especially in sports, to become greater, to go harder. I mean, I have my own personal story like that. I started gymnastics when I was a lot younger, or a lot older, sorry. And actually my coach told me, you're too old to start gymnastics right now. Everyone else has years ahead of you. You'll never get on a college team. You'll never get a scholarship. These things are too far out of your reach. And I use that as motivation in order to fight harder and to work out harder. And that was something that, it was this motivator for me. And I love it. This story is incredible. Let's go ahead. We're going to jump into the scriptures here for a bit and dig into some biblical examples. Last week we had an incredible time talking about David's mighty men and how incredible these guys were and how they stood up and they stayed strong and had firm convictions. And Scott helped us to understand that on a personal level and how we can do that in our day and age as men, especially right now during quarantine. Today, we're going to look a little at David and the mighty men in a little bit of a different light. You know, David had a lot of ups and downs in his life, like many of us do. A lot of us know the story of David and Goliath, where, you know, David comes in, he's never had any battle experience, but he's fought lions and bears watching the sheep growing up. And then he faces off Goliath, and he's the only one in the entire Israelite army who is willing to, and he defeats Goliath. And from there, he just gets more and more accolades, and he just does incredible things, and it's phenomenal. You know, he gets to marry the king's wife after that, which was an incredible honor. And he continues moving forward with all these amazing exploits until he actually becomes more popular than the king. And it was said of him that, you know, Saul, the king, had killed his thousands, but David his tens of thousands. His best friend was Jonathan, Saul's son, and they had this incredible relationship. But all of these things, and especially as David became more popular than Saul, Saul took that to heart and really decided that he didn't like David anymore and had it out against David and decided that he wanted to kill him. And so David has to go on the run for his life. So he really goes, David's story is interesting. He goes from hero overnight, almost seemingly, to this point where the king is trying to kill him. And that's where we're going to start off reading today. Right after this, David, you know, or shortly after this, David is in this cave, and it's called the Cave of Adullam. And in 1 Samuel 22, verse 1, it says, David left Gath and escaped to the Cave of Adullam. When his brothers and his father's household heard about it, they went down to him there. All those who were in distress or in debt or discontented gathered around him, and he became their leader. I'm sorry, their commander. About 400 men were with him. So David is on the run from King Saul, and he's also on the run from the king of Gath, because the king of Gath was trying to turn him in. David acts like he's insane and drools on his own beard to make himself look insane, and the king of Gath kind of just passes over and says, listen, this guy's a fool. I don't even want to deal with him. And David escapes that way to this cave. So David is on the run from two different kings. He's just escaped. He's in this cave. He's desolate, and his brothers and his father come down to comfort him. It's an incredible, you know, act of love from his family, and it's what David needed during that time. But the interesting part is the next section about these men who gather around him. You know, his brothers and fathers come, which is awesome. I'm sure that was so encouraging for David. But then you also have this ragtag group of vagabonds that surrounds him. It says that they were distressed, that they were in debt, and that they were discontent. They weren't happy. These are not the guys that I would want to surround myself when I'm having a tough time. In fact, these aren't the guys that I would want to surround myself ever. I mean, if you think about it, like that's not the type, especially in our modern day world, we don't think, oh yeah, you know, surround yourself with these types of men. And yet, if you look through the story of 1 Samuel and look at David's life, you find out that these 400 over the next couple of years become 600, and these men wind up becoming the mighty men of David that we read about last week. These guys weren't these incredible hero warriors right off the bat, and they came in from years of training from childhood, and they were awesome and incredible and all these different things. These guys were probably in a worse shape than David was. And yet he worked with him. He became their commander, their chief. And, you know, through the next couple of years, they became, as they ran and then started actually having battles and fighting back and winning wars, and God was on their side, they became this incredible group of men, and it is phenomenal. You know, a modern day example, kind of like the one that I mentioned earlier for myself, is, you know, you might remember this quote before. It says, I've missed over 9,000 shots in my career. I've lost almost 300 games. 26 times I've been trusted to take the game's winning shot and missed. I've failed over and over and over again in my life, and that is why I succeed. And of course, that's Michael Jordan. You know, he had a crazy history. Jordan was 5'11" in high school, and he was told that because of his height and his skill level, that he, you know, shouldn't play basketball and was actually cut from the high school team. He later went on to say, whenever I was working out and got tired and figured I ought to stop, I'd close my eyes and see that list in the locker room without my name on it. And that usually got me going again. Wow, that's an incredible story. But the truth is, in sports, that makes sense to me. But when I'm having a tough time in life, the fact that I'm having a tough time and looking at all my failures does not motivate me to become great at that point in time. I don't know about you, but when I'm a real zero, when I'm really in despair, when I'm really depressed, there's almost nothing seemingly that can help me actually get out of that state. And so let's look at what David went through a little bit. And then we're going to have, I'm excited for the guy that we're going to have on today. He's going to help us out as well and talk about some of his experiences and how they relate spiritually. Let's talk about David and his friends later on. So these are who these men become. So David is there for them. He becomes their commander. In 2 Samuel 23:13, it says, during harvest time, 3 of the 30 chief warriors came down to David at the cave of Adullam, while a band of Philistines was encamped in the valley of Rephaim. At that time, David was in the stronghold, and the Philistine garrison was at Bethlehem. David longed for water and said, oh, that someone would get me a drink of water from the well near the gate of Bethlehem. So the three mighty warriors broke through the Philistine lines, drew water from the well near the gate of Bethlehem, and carried it back to David. You know, these are the types of relationships that David cultivated with these men. And the first thing that helps us get through tough times is relationships. And, you know, here, you know, David, at first, these were guys who were in despair. They needed to be lifted up by David. And now David's having a tough time. And, you know, their trainer, so to speak, is having a difficult time. And they come to him in return. And, you know, many people believe that David didn't personally ask them to do this, but that he just mentions it and they overhear it. And, you know, however it happens, these guys hear this crazy request. David wants some water from his hometown. David wants some water from Bethlehem, and they break through the Philistine lines. They go to a well, you know, and it's not like you just, you know, pour the water real quick and then you run. You got to, you know, pull up the bucket, and after it's thrown down, all that stuff. It's not an easy process. And so, you know, they break through the Philistine lines to get some water from Bethlehem, and they bring it back to David. Out at encouraging one another in what we do. And yet it's something that is so helpful. It's so beneficial. God calls us to it. And it's so powerful to be able to be there for one another. You know, one of my questions for us today is, do you have close relationships? Do you have guys in your life that are close enough to you to where they would do this type of thing for you and you would do the same for them? If not, don't be scared and don't be prideful if that's what's holding you back, but go find someone and ask, you know, let's get close. Let's have fun together. Let's have a blast, but let's be real with each other at the same time and build some incredible relationships so that when those hard times come, or if they're already here, you can get some incredible help from some awesome guys. You know, and I love our fellowship here at Gulf Coast Christian Church. We have some phenomenal men. And if you're in a tough spot, if you're feeling despaired, please, we would love to talk, love to chat, love to connect with you, help you out. And we're going to have a ton of fun as well once the virus settles down a little bit. I'm excited about it. Okay, so what else goes on for David that helps him go from kind of the zero spot to the hero spot? I want to share this with you guys. The next slide here is this is a cool slide. So it's actually a cool document. So I pulled some of this from Blue Letter Bible, and repositioned it so it's actually in a chronological timeline. And basically what happens as David is going through this spot, he becomes king at the end of 1 Samuel in chapter 31. And so there's all these different, he's going back and forth, between running from Saul and winning different battles and, deciding not to kill Saul and letting God handle whatever he needs to. David has a lot of ups and downs during this period. He's got a lot of low points, but he also has a lot of victories. And I love this document because what it does is it pairs Psalms that David has written with their chronological or the corresponding spots in 1 Samuel and some of the other books that talk about David's life. And there are actually 81 throughout David's life. Now, I put all the Psalms and how they correlate to different spots in history up, and you guys can go and you can get this actually if you want it. This is only about half of the list as it's on the screen right now as far as what David went through corresponding Psalms. You can get it on our events page at our website, gc3.church, if you'd like it, free download. I highly suggest this is an incredible Bible study because what you get to see these ups and downs. You see what David is going through, and then you see how he talks to God and how he wrestles through these issues on a personal level. It's phenomenal. I absolutely love this Bible study. I'm still digging through it myself, and I encourage you to join in with me. It's a blast. But let me sum this up, and it's interesting. I think there's a scripture in the New Testament that really sums up a lot of why David went through what he went through. Being king of an entire nation, that's no small task. And as I look at David's life, he has this victory with Goliath, but I don't actually think he was ready to be king yet. And I think God had a lot more to teach him. And if you look at David's life, he's got humility, but he's a young guy who really wants to take charge and does in a powerful, incredible way. He relies on God. But to me, his humility really grows before he becomes king. And he really submits himself to God in a way that I don't think he did to the same extent and the same level. And it's just, it's phenomenal what he goes through. This scripture in the New Testament, for me at least, sums it up. In 2 Corinthians 1, it says, "We do not want you to be uninformed, brothers and sisters, about the troubles we experienced in the province of Asia. We were under great pressure, far beyond our ability to endure, so that we despaired of life itself. Indeed, we felt we had received the sentence of death. But this happened that we might not rely on ourselves, but on God who raises the dead. He has delivered us from such a deadly peril, and he will deliver us again." And the cool thing about this scripture is right before the context, he's speaking about how we need to comfort one another in the trials and sufferings, very much so like David does with these mighty men. And then he jumps in, and it's all about relying on God. And that's what you're going to find if you go through this Bible study on the Psalms, is that time and time again, David goes to God. That is where his strength lies. That's how he's able to press forward. It's not because he looks at a list of his failures or anything else. It's because he relied on God and surrounded himself with good men. And that's what we need to do right now. I know it's tough to get with other guys. I know that may be impossible for your situation or whatever city you're in, or here in Corpus Christi. The virus is still on the loose. It's running around and getting people. And so we need to be safe, but we can get on the phone. We can get on Zoom. We can social distance and be very careful with each other. Get with some guys and get on your knees and rely on God. Jump into the Bible. If you don't know how to read the Bible, get someone to help you and go, man, I want to be in some Bible studies and help me to actually learn how to do this. But to me, this is really the crux of what David went through and how he turned out to do so well. As he progressed forward, he relied more and more and more on God until eventually Saul dies. David takes over as king. And David is a humble king. And we're going to look some more about David's humility later on and how phenomenal it was. But for now, I'm excited. We're going to pull in Danny Doble. He's one of the members here at GC3, and he's been through quite a few ups and downs in his life, and we're going to get some input on how we can put this into practice practically in our day and age. And please, we're going to be talking, but if you have questions, please post a comment in the chat. If you're on YouTube or if you're on Facebook, we'll see them and we can actually respond and have discussions about the things that you guys are talking about. So please jump on in, participate with us, and we're going to have a great time. So here is Danny. Danny, welcome. It is great to have you with us this morning. Yeah. And so I understand that you have been through quite a bit of rehab personally in your life.
Yeah, so to clarify, this is physical therapy. Sometimes rehab means something else too, but
sure.
I've had a lot of injuries. In fact, it's interesting that you asked me to talk about this because I'm kind of in a rehab situation right now. I had 2 injuries towards the end of last year, one on my groin, one on my elbow, and I'm kind of in the process of building myself back. I'm running again and biking. It's hard to do sports because of the virus right now, but at least the groin is doing pretty good, but the elbow I'm still not quite there yet. So I'm actually in the middle of it right now. And so it's just, I've had, unfortunately, quite a few of those kind of situations. And so I think, it kind of goes to a fair amount of what you were talking about, especially the one thing that really stuck out to me that relates to this in my life that you were talking about is just the idea of close friends. Probably the first big injury that I had, because I had a few before that, but I was 16 years old. I sprained really tore all the ligaments in my ankle in a basketball tournament, and it was at night, so we ended up going to the emergency room. That was the option we had, and they put a cast on it and gave me painkillers, and that was pretty much it. And it really just kept getting worse. That really didn't help at all. It looked like a ham. It was so swollen. It was disgusting, different colors, and obviously I couldn't walk on it. The pain was unbearable, and it was actually my dad that's actually watching this right now. Hey, Dad, he finally said, this isn't working. We got to try something else. And so that was my first experience with physical therapy, because he took me to the sports medicine clinic that was like the best in Puerto Rico, where I grew. You see the flag behind me. And they had just a really good reputation, but I didn't know anything about it. And when they first saw me, the first thing out of their mouths was, "Why didn't you come before? Why didn't you get treated?" And the truth is, I just didn't know any better. And if my father hadn't said, "Hey, we need to do this. We need to try something different. There's something else we can do here," I probably would have just stayed where I was. And so that was one thing. And then I remember the first guy that treated me there, I still remember him. His name was Jerry. He told me, if you need to cuss me out and scream, I can take it, but this is going to hurt. And so the first 3 days, he said, he had to squeeze all that liquid up from the bottom of my foot all the way up my leg so he could get all the liquid out of there. And he had to do that for 3 days in a row. It was excruciating. And I wasn't a Christian at the time, so I will confess I did cuss and scream. But 3 days later, that swelling that kept getting worse for a month was gone. And then, I saw the head guy soon after that, and he said, "Okay, we're going to do this. Come over here, follow me. We're going to do this." And so I grabbed my crutches and I start following. He's like, "No. No more crutches. Get rid of those crutches." And so he forced me to start walking on it, which I was able to do. And so within a week or two, they had me walking again.
Wow.
And, the rehab was still was still difficult, but I think one of the things is that I've had over 10 therapists probably in my life. Like I said, unfortunately, had a lot of injuries, but the ones that my favorite ones, the ones that I remember the most, are the ones that really pushed me. And certainly, just like I've had 2 knee surgeries, one on each knee, and I remember on both of them, I think my mom flew. We were living in Atlanta at the time. My mom flew to help us out. And then, my wife, even my kids, especially on the second one, that they were older, had to do a lot of stuff. I couldn't, in both of those, I couldn't walk for like 6 weeks. And the rehab was pretty long. But, just having those people helping and encouraging and pushing you as well, because sometimes you need that. I think, and I think the other thing is just perseverance, because especially the more serious injuries, the surgeries, the first surgery, it took me about a year to recover from that, and it was painful for quite a while. And I even had, like, beforehand, I had people tell me not to do surgery, that their knee was never the same again, and I think that's true sometimes. In my case, I think sometimes people don't do the rehab and don't put in the work, and but I had to work really hard for all that time. And for me, these things have an emotional effect because I love sports. I love the competing with other people, with other teams. I love the teamwork aspect of some of the sports, but I also love competing with myself. I've gotten into running because it's something I share with my son that he does, and I'm not that competitive. I'm not as good as he is, but just I love trying to get better and competing with myself and just pushing myself to get better. And so when I can't do those things, it's tough, and sometimes it's kind of like, is it worth it to keep getting hurt and things like that? But I think like with the first surgery, even though it was so difficult and it took a year, that was 13 and a half years ago. And I'm still running, 5Ks and things like that. I mean, I got hurt last year, but that wasn't the knee. That was something else.
Yeah.
And so I think just those lessons, even now that I'm kind of hurt again, help me to remember, yes, it is worth it. And, if I push myself, I'll be able to do these things again. And of course, that has spiritual implications as well. So, those are kind of some of the things that I thought of as you were talking.
Yeah, absolutely. I had a similar situation myself a year and a half ago. I broke my knee, had to have playing flag football, had to have surgery where they, put a plate and 5 screws in my leg, couldn't walk for, 2 months there. And it was a really tough time, and then went through 6 months of physical therapy as well. Had a guy telling me, you got to keep pushing, you got to keep going, it was tough. I didn't like him sometimes, some days, and told him, I was like, I don't like you right now, but I'm going to do it anyways. But, for me, it was interesting that finding out, I can relate a lot to the sports thing. I when he told me, hey, your knee's never going to be the same again, at the doctor's office, man, I teared up. That was an emotional hit for me when he said, hey, we've got to have surgery on your knee, and you will have to have a knee replacement someday. It's just, is it in 5 years or is it in 25 years? This surgery right now will change. And for me, that was a massive hit on who I am as a person and an individual, because I love sports. I love the outdoors. I love running. I love hiking. I have aspirations of climbing mountains and all sorts of, crazy fun stuff. But, when he told me that, it was a hit to my psyche in a lot of ways. And then sitting for 2 months, unable to do anything, it really, it affected me on a spiritual level as well. And that was a difficult time for me. What are some of the things, we looked at David's life. He relied on God. He had great guys around him. What are some other spiritual things that we can do to get out of a rut, if that's what we're in? Or even maybe we feel like, I'm not in a rut, but I'm not doing the best that I could be. How do we turn that story around?
Well, I mean, I think to kind of, apply these lessons, these things that I thought about from recovery, physical recovery perspective, like I said, I think they apply spiritually as well. And so I think, to your point about the close friends that you were talking about, the men that have had the biggest impact in my life spiritually, and even, like I mentioned, my father, just, obviously raising and, just is people that have expectations, that are not just gonna allow me really to settle, or to not, to just get stuck, or to quit, and they're gonna push me. They're gonna tell me what I need to hear, and not necessarily what I want to hear. And so I think having guys like that, but that doesn't always just happen. I think sometimes you have to decide to especially like when we moved to Corpus Christi, you have to decide, okay, I'm gonna build those kind of new relationships, and then when I have friends like that, I still gotta let them. I still gotta be open about what's going on, and be willing to put my worst foot forward. It's something that I've learned, especially recently, is that I have to be proactive about it. Instead of trying to paint a rosy picture all the time, I gotta really tell people what's really going on. And so I think that's one thing. And I think just on the perseverance side, I've had my share of downs too, spiritually, disappointments, despair, frustration, people not responding when I try to help them out, or just things that are going on that I don't have control over. And, you feel like quitting, or not giving your best, or not reaching out to people, or whatever the case might be. And, just again, that thought that it's worth it to stick with it, even if it's painful in the interim. And so you just got to keep pushing and keep dreaming. And so I think those are some of the things on the spiritual side that I think apply.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that relates a lot. Eugene posted over on Facebook that having open conversations with his wife and his friends was something that really helps him out. And then who was it? I think there were a couple. Let's see. There you go. Gerald, being true while being open is the key. Absolutely. I mean, I think being honest about where we're at, it's not what we want to do. And it takes a lot of guts to be open and to be real with somebody else. And yet that's the first step in getting on the right path and taking that turnaround story. A couple of other people, I think actually Gerald was one of them, posted he likes Romans 12. And then Scott said he likes reading Job and about Solomon's life. Danny, are there any scriptures or any chapters in the Bible that really help you come out of a rut when you're in one, or really encourage you when you're not feeling so great?
Yeah, actually, and I put it in the comments a few days ago, I think, but I read it, this week sometime. I can't remember exactly which day it was, but I was reading about Gideon, and just I really love that story, and it's always encouraged me, because, like you said, it's kind of that zero to hero, to use your phrase there, where he really wasn't, and even in his own mind, he was like, I'm in the least of the tribes, and my clan is the least of the clans of that tribe, and I'm the least in my family, or whatever, so it's like, that's how he viewed himself. When he was first called, and, and then it was a process. It wasn't like, okay, he was called, and then all of a sudden, just, turned it around. But it was kind of a process, and God was patient with him. And, he had to, like, okay, well, can you do this to see if it's really from God? And can you do that? And, he had to work through a lot of doubts and fears, and things like that. And so that kind of encouraged me with, just because I think like right now, even the rehab thing is going kind of slow for me, and or slower. It's always slower than you want it to be, for sure. And so, but I think spiritually, just that's somebody that I look at that, okay, he didn't have that confidence, and God was patient with him getting there, but then, he got it, and he made a huge impact on a lot of people. And of course, they had military victory, and all that kind of stuff as well. And so that's always a good reminder for me.
Yeah, absolutely, bro. That's great stuff. I mean, yeah, absolutely. Gideon is a great story, a great example of, someone, and I like that story too, because he's not someone who was in too bad of a spot, and yet he felt like he was just a nothing, and God had so many incredible plans for him.
Right.
And a lot of times we're just focused on going from zero to normal, when God's focused on us going from zero to hero, to what we don't even know or understand or believe that we can be. And he's got this massive vision for us, and these great plans that seem impossible when we're at the zero spot, and might even seem impossible when we feel like we're in a normal, spot in our life. So, man, I love that example. Danny, thanks so much for joining us today. I appreciate your input, your openness, and it was great talking with you this morning. So thank you so much for joining us. It was awesome having you. Amen. All right. Well, guys, we are headed towards the end of today's mini series here. Thanks so much for joining us. I want to remind you guys of our theme scripture here, which is be watchful, stand firm in the faith, act like men, be strong. And that's what we're trying to do. We are trying to act like men of God, understand what that means in our day and age as we strive for greatness with all the things that are going on around us. We've got an awesome spiritual test assessment that you can take over on our website at gc3.com, or I'm sorry, .church. It'll show up after a couple of seconds. You're on the page. You just put your email address on, and you get access to that. And that'll help you to figure out some spots where maybe you can grow in, and you don't know if you're doing great in that area or not. And it gives you an assessment for yourself of some growth spots. So please check that out. We'll be back here in 2 weeks for the next session, which is going to be called The Fall. And that will be September 5th. As we move into the fall, we'll be talking about the fall. Be sure to join us then. Danny, thanks again so much for jumping on with us this morning. Guys, have a great day.